All right. I call this meeting to order, and I thank very much Paul Porter of the Wisconsin State Historical Preservation Office for joining us. He's going to deliver a presentation and then offer some Q&A regarding the Wisconsin Residential 25% Historic Tax Credit Program for approved restoration of historic homes listed on the National Register of Historic Places. After Paul's presentation, we'll go on with a brief version of our normal meeting. But with that, I'd say, Paul, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for that great introduction. And I'm really excited to be here to share this with you. I just ran through it a little while ago, and I had about 27 minutes worth of slides to go through, and then time after that for Q&A. And with your need to hard stop at 6 o'clock, that'll hopefully give you a little bit more time to get on with your business stuff. So let me just see about sharing my screen here. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen with the video on it?
We can, Paul.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Slideshow from beginning. Okay. Can you all see it? Is the tax credits for historic buildings taking up the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I always have to get just double check to make sure that technology is being in a cooperative mood. So anyway, okay. Well, I always like to start off with this cartoon on the next page here because, you know, it's tax time and we all kind of do that. And the guy says, none of this makes any sense. It's almost as if they don't want me to understand. And the woman says, well, maybe that's why they call it the tax code. So I was going to kick out of that. So anyway, the difference is what is a tax credit? A tax credit differs from a tax deduction. The tax deduction lowers the amount of income that is subject to taxation, whereas a tax credit lowers the amount of tax owed. So $1 of tax credit reduces the amount of income tax owed by $1. So that makes things a little easier to work with. Today I'm going to be briefly touching on 2 of the 3 different programs that we offer at WHS. For income producing properties, we offer the federal and state tax incentives program that provides 20% tax credits for rehabilitation costs. Some of our notable projects in the Milwaukee area include the Soldiers Home, the Milwaukee Athletic Club, the Warner Theater, which is now the new home of the Milwaukee Symphony, and the Oriental Theater. The homeowner program, which we're going to focus on today, offers 25% tax credits for rehabilitation costs on your historic homes. If you spend the full $40,000 per project rehabilitating your home, you will get $10,000 back in tax credits. So that's not a bad deal by any means. It is important to do research on your home for your application to determine if your property is eligible for tax credits. So if you go to our website at wisconsinhistory.org, which you can see at the top of the screen, the last tile on the right is the Preserve Your Homes and Properties tile from the main screen. Click on that, and then the next screen that pops up, you will see a search bar. And in that search bar, type in your address, and it will come up with an index page that should list your home. So click on your highlighted address, and then it will open the full page about your home. And the information on this page is very helpful in filling out the Part 1 of your application. The Part 1 establishes the historic significance of your property. Note also that the database includes all surveyed properties, and it does not necessarily guarantee that if your home is in the database, that it is actually listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Surveyed properties in the database are old enough to be evaluated for eligibility, but their presence there doesn't guarantee that a property will qualify for the tax credits. If after conducting your research, you still aren't sure if your property is eligible, you can email us at the email address there at taxcredits@wisconsinhistory.org for additional assistance to determine if your property is listed. To access the application, you will go to wisconsinhistory.org /records /article /CS3942. And you will see this page that I have on this slide here with the information on it. And it is a program overview inclusive of your research. You'll want to mail your application before you do any work and on the process of applying for the program. And if you scroll to the bottom of that page is where you will find the actual application instructions and the application. Download both items as instructions are helpful in filling out your application. And I also want to make a note here too. You must receive written approval of your application from our office before you start any work. If you do start work before you get written approval, unfortunately, the way the state statute is written, it will disqualify you from the tax credits for whatever activity that you've started without written approval. So that is, make sure you don't lose out any money on your tax credits. So, but fortunately, we do turn around projects pretty quickly. Okay, so the next slide here is about the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and these are the 10 guideposts that we use in our office to evaluate projects for meeting the standards, because that is the main guidepost of what we're doing when we're reviewing these projects. So the first standard is a property shall be used for its historic purpose or be placed in a new use that requires minimal change to the defining characteristics of the building and its site and environment. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. The ones that we see most often, or that we see most often in terms of working on homeowner projects, are standards 2, 5, and 6, and 9 and 10. Second one is historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. So basically that one is indicating that, you know, if you have an original element on your home, you should try to retain it and repair it and keep it if you can. Third one is each property shall be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. Changes that create a false sense of historical development, such as adding conjectural features or architectural elements from other buildings, shall not be undertaken. So you wouldn't like take a house that's like a complete Queen Anne and has all the decorative stuff on it, and then put on like International Modern Edition onto the house, because it doesn't work with it. So then the fourth one is that most properties change over time, and those changes that have acquired historic significance in their own right shall be retained and preserved. And this means that if you have additions or alterations to the house that are 50 years old and older, those should be looked at to see whether or not they've gained historic significance in their own right and whether or not they should be kept. Number 5, distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques are examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. This one is also, again, pretty straightforward in terms of trying to retain the integrity of your structure, of keeping the original elements. And 6, this one is the one where that I come into most often. And this is deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. When the severity of the deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities, and where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features shall be substantiated by documentary, physical, or pictorial evidence. The thing that I come across most often in reference to this is when I get applications of people wanting to replace historic windows. Your first thing that you should be looking at is repairing your original windows if at all possible. And fortunately, there are several firms in Milwaukee that do this type of work in terms of what we call a tune-up on a historic window, where they'll replace the weather stripping, fix your sash cords, replace any broken glass, reputty them, and so forth. And then we also do offer tax credits for adding exterior storm windows and interior storm windows. So you can actually, if you do both interior and exterior storm windows, you actually do get the triple glazing thermal properties of a triple glazed window, but you can still take them apart and actually clean both sides of the glass. So, but that is one that I come across the most often with projects. The seventh one is chemical or physical treatments such as sandblasting that cause damage to historic materials should not be used. The surface cleaning of structures, if appropriate, shall be undertaken using the gentlest means possible. That's also, again, pretty self-explanatory. Number 8 is one that you're probably not going to see with any of the homeowner projects. This usually has more to do with like historic battlefields or state historic sites like Billalooey, where there's archaeological resources. And that one is that you should try to protect and preserve any archaeological resources. And if you find any during disturbing, mitigation needs to be taken for that. But again, homeowners within an urban environment are probably not going to run into that. Number 9 is new additions. Exterior alterations or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. So if you're planning to do an addition to a historic property, and we do a lot of projects with folks who want to add on, the addition needs to be done in a way that it's subservient to the main structure. The architectural details should be simplified from the original design of the building, and then also differentiated from that building. And then the 10th one is that new additions and adjacent or related new construction shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. So that addition should be put on in a way that if a future owner wants to remove it and you reduce the footprint back to the historic footprint, that addition can be removed without causing too much damage to the building. So this next slide is the website for the Technical Preservation Services at the National Park Service here. And as I've said before, all projects need to meet the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. And more in-depth information about interpreting standards can be obtained on the Technical Preservation Services website provided by the National Park Service. The site also has preservation briefs, which I use quite frequently, and those are geared towards specific elements of historic buildings so that you can look at each component of the building that you're wondering how to treat, and it will give you guidance on those specific elements. So we use those a lot for the income producing projects, much larger scale projects, but they're also very helpful for the homeowner as well. And we also do have versions of that on our Wisconsin History website as well, that are written more in layman's terms rather than technical writing. So whichever you prefer to read, you can look at either site to get that kind of information. Okay, so next slide. Okay, well, this next slide is a handout that we give whenever anybody's doing a roofing project. Excuse me a second, I need a drink. Sorry, public speaking has a tendency to dry my throat out. One of the things that I like to help put an image into people's minds of when they're looking for roofing shingles is that shingles that have the slight shadow lines will meet the standards, like as you can see in the example up in the middle box. But if they have heavy shadow lines in the bottom that are thick, like Groucho Marx's eyebrows in the corner there, those are too thick and they're not going to meet the standards. So if you think about Groucho Marx when you're looking at shingles, that will help you figure out whether or not those shadow lines are too thick. Also, if you have a historic house that has an unusual color on the roof, like red, green, or blue, If you have any old historic photographs showing those colors, as a historic precedent, then you can, put that color back on. But most of the time, people put on, black or gray or brown shingles because those were the typical colors. But those more vibrant colors were mostly used on buildings built between 1920 and 1940. So, and also if you have a wood shingle, slate, or metal or clay tile roofing material, you can contact our office so we can help with you to select the right materials for replacement and methodology to implement that replacement of the roofing materials. We also do cover, as you can see in the bottom pictures here, we do cover adding ridge vents and other type of ventilation to help properly ventilate the roof on your house. So our program began back in '92, and in 21 we approved $6.6 million worth of eligible work on homeowners across the state. But over the past 3 years that Claire and I have been working together at the office, we've averaged about between 500 to 600 projects every year, and have seen a total investment averaging between 10 to 11 million in historic homes across the state. And on average, we're seeing between 6 and 7 million spent on eligible expenses. The remaining amount of ineligible expenses are spent mostly on additions and remodeling interior spaces and landscaping. But the 25% tax credits for homeowners make the work a lot more affordable. For every $40,000 you spend on eligible expenses, you get $10,000 back. And again, that's a really nice cost savings, especially when you're looking at larger project budgets. So also, if you have a historic home, take a look at your outbuildings on your property. And if they coordinate architecturally with the main residence, then there is a good chance that they are contributing features to the property. The most common outbuildings that we see are either a carriage house or a detached garage. When applying for a project for an outbuilding on your property, be sure to take photos of all 4 sides of the structure and send them in with your application for evaluation. We will inform you of whether or not the work can be counted on the outbuilding once we've had a chance to look at the photographs. Okay, and then there are 3 types of properties that are eligible for the homeowner tax credit program. Number 1, houses that are individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places. 2, houses that are contributing resources to a National Register listed historic district. And 3, houses that are individually eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Houses that are contributing resources to a potential historic district but are not listed yet cannot take advantage of the homeowner tax credit until that district is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. There are some communities in the Mohawk area that are dealing with this issue of being in a potential district but have not been listed yet. 2 example communities are Shorewood and Whitefish Bay. Okay, so the application process, we have laid that out here on the screen for you. The owner submits the application and photos to our office, and it should include the Part 1 and Part 2 applications. Part 1 certifies that the property is a historic property for the purposes of the tax credit program, and the Part 2 certifies that the proposed work will meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, which I went over briefly with you a little bit ago. 9 times out of 10, an approved project will receive a conditional approval with stipulations on how the work is to be carried out to meet the standards. And these are basically guideposts that we provide to homeowners so that they can be sure that what they're doing is going to meet the standards. And the conditional approval letter will contain 2 sheets with the conditions along with the cover letter. So one conditions sheet is for the homeowner to keep, and the other is to give to their contractor or contractors, as the case may be, so they can understand what those parameters are for their clients. It is the homeowner's responsibility to give them their copy and to monitor the work they are doing to make sure they are not doing something that could result in a project denial. We're always available to answer questions. So if you're not sure, either call or email us and ask, because we're always happy to help out and try to steer you in the right direction. Once the scope of work on the application is completed, and often includes multiple repair items, then the owner should take photographs of the finished work and mail them in with the pink Part 3 application for review and approval. The timeline for research and planning a project varies depending on how large the scope of work is to be completed and how many estimates an owner needs for the proposed work. Now, an owner can choose whatever contractor they want to work with. We do not tell people who to work with. However, we do keep a list of qualified contractors who have different specialty areas around the state. So we can provide those contact information upon request. And once that information is compiled, send in the copies of the estimates of the firms you wish to hire with the application and photos for review. And also, you can also have multiple projects open at the same time, because fortunately the state statute is silent on that issue. So if you have a really big, expensive project, you can split it up into a number of projects to cover the cost of that. So what are some common tax credit projects that we work with? Actually, roofs are the #1 project that we get requests for. But if you look at the exterior envelope of the building, all of those elements are eligible for the tax credits. Doing things such as repainting the trim and siding, or repointing the masonry on brick and stone homes, repairing original windows, repairing porches and railings, repairing and replacing roofing and guttering materials, fixing and patching stucco work on the house. But it is also important to note that the projects that endeavor to repair the historic materials rather than ripping out for modern materials will meet the standards. So ripping out and replacing historic elements with new elements, such as replacing all the windows that I touched on earlier with new ones for energy efficiency purposes, is not an allowable activity in the program. Repairing the original windows, adding or replacing exterior storm windows, and adding interior storm windows are all eligible expenses, as I mentioned earlier. However, if the original windows are rotted beyond repair, then they can be replaced if the photographic evidence is clear on their advanced deterioration. The replacement windows need to match the original windows in design configuration, finishing details and materials. So wood for wood. But one thing to know is that vinyl windows do not meet the standards under any circumstance. Unfortunately, they just are not long life products, and that's why they don't meet the standards. So I wanted to show you this house because this is a really good example of, how far the tax credits can help you go from what you start with to what you end with. And this particular house, this homeowner bought the house that needed a lot of work, as you can see in the photographs. And working with us, they were able to restore the house to its original grandeur and save themselves a lot of money in the process. The owners have completed 6 projects with us and have spent over $168,000 in eligible expenses. And the 25% tax credits have resulted in roughly $42,000 in tax credits for them. So you can buy a pretty nice car with that. And looking at the 6 projects, that's slightly over the cost of one of the 6 projects that they got back for that. So as you can see, they are well worth pursuing. Also, you can carry the tax credits forwards up to 15 years on your personal income taxes if you have little to no tax liabilities. So that's another nice thing, is that you can just save it and use it as you need it. The state law also allows you to have multiple projects open at the same time. Each project cannot exceed 40,000, so an applicant can have numerous applications open with us at the same time. So far, the record holder for the most applications open at once is the McLaren House that used to be the UWM Alumni House. The owner is up to 24 applications, as there was a lot of work that needed to go into that house. So, and that project has been really exciting to work on. I've really been enjoying helping the new homeowner turn that back into a single family home. Okay, so some of the eligible costs. Replacing failing roofs is usually at the top of the list, as water is your #1 enemy in your home, whether it is old or new. Water is always the leading cause of extensive damage to our built environment. Repairing original windows and giving them a tune-up to make them more energy efficient by repairing the glazing, putty, weather stripping, and cracked panes of glass is another eligible activity that I've mentioned before. The third photo shows the top of a chimney that has suffered mortar loss and water damage. And repairing and rebuilding chimneys with either salvaged or matching new brick is another repair we see quite often. We always try to encourage people to reuse their original brick if it's still salvageable and reusable. And if not, then we need to try to match the original brick as close as possible. Foundation repairs are also another expensive category that is covered by our program, as shown in the picture on the bottom left, and I've helped a lot of homeowners with foundation issues. Also, rough plumbing and rough electrical systems are also included, as well as the mechanical equipment such as furnaces, boilers, water heaters, air conditioning systems, and supporting mechanical equipment such as water softeners. Also, the installation of new air conditioning systems in a home that did not have it is also an eligible expense. And where the electrical and plumbing is concerned, the rough plumbing, such as your supply lines, your waste stacks, and your sewer lines are eligible, but your plumbing fixtures and faucets are not eligible because those are a matter of personal taste, whereas the rest of it is actual necessary components to the system. The same thing with electrical systems. Your service panels and rewiring the house is eligible, but your switches, your outlet designs, and your lighting fixtures are not eligible because those are also up to a matter of personal taste. Okay, what are some of the ineligible costs? Well, I mentioned already the plumbing fix, or the plumbing fixtures and the faucets, and the electrical switches, outlets, and light fixtures are not eligible. But these things do need to be included in the scope of work, because we do have to review the entire project as a whole. Some of the other activities that are not eligible but reviewable are refinishing wood floors, new additions to the historic structure, and remodeling of interior spaces such as kitchens and bathrooms, and adding insulation to your home. I would have to say that remodeling of kitchens and bathrooms are probably the top two ineligible expenses that we work on. But if you do have to rewire that bathroom and redo the plumbing systems, and the same thing with the kitchen, then those expenses are eligible for the rough work. But the main objective of the program is to maintain the exterior condition and appearance of these historic homes, and to maintain the electrical and mechanical systems that keep these homes functioning. Doing these projects helps protect the value of the individual homes, as well as keeping the property values stable in historic districts. So it is a win-win proposition for all who participate in the program, for themselves as well as their neighbors. And that's the end of my presentation. So let's see. Okay, stop share. Okay, all right. So what questions do you have for me?
I just want to thank you for actually answering a question that I had in terms of remodeling kitchens and bathrooms. I was wondering if the plumbing and the electric would be covered. So it's nice to know that even though the actual remodeling and the cabinets and fixtures aren't covered, I'm glad to know that the plumbing is.
Yeah, the plumbing and the rough electrical work are eligible, and those two things can get very expensive in a hurry. So anyone here who has been through a kitchen and bath remodel, you're probably well acquainted with what the bills can look like when you're done with it.
Hey, Paul, so from a logistics perspective, do you have to submit receipts to you guys and proof of purchase of everything? And then if the follow-up to that is how do you inform or how do we inform on our taxes that we get the credit? Do you provide us with like some type of form?
Okay, when you file that pink Part 3 form, what you do is you add up all your eligible expenses and put that in on the form. I do not need to see your receipts, but you do need to keep them so that when you fill out the Schedule HR through the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, that you have that proof there of what your expenses were. And so the Schedule HR will give you the places to list out, what you spent on various aspects, and be sure to keep all your receipts and make copies of them so that you can submit that with your income taxes. You can also, one thing that does frequently happen is that people do get a little confused about when they should submit that Part 3, especially if they have like several projects going on and a very large scope of work. You only submit that Part 3 when you're done with everything. Now, if you're doing your projects over a couple of years, and I did forget to mention this, you can select either a 2-year or a 5-year phasing on your projects. So if you have something that you really need to stretch out the budget over the period of 5 years to pay for it all, that is an option, and you do need to select that at the beginning of the project. So if let's say you have a 5-year project and you've completed like about 1/5 of it in that first year, you can use your signed Part 2 as proof when you file your taxes, and take the tax credits on what you have finished so far that year. But that does come with a caveat that if for some reason that your project, at the end of the project, when I'm reviewing the Part 3, if it doesn't meet the standards, then you would have to pay back the tax credits that you took. So, I'm required by law to inform you of that. So, but that's up to each person's decision-making process as to whether or not they, want to take the tax credits as they're going along, or if just wait till the very end of the project to do it. That's up to the constituent to decide.
Paul, if you've submitted a project request and got it approved with a particular budget, and when you start these things, something always changes. If it ends up being more expensive than what you submitted, can you still claim the full amount of the repair costs as opposed to having to, because you're already in it,
Right. Yeah. No, actually, you can have up to $40,000 on each application. And I usually tell people that on each application that it's wise to only go about 35,000 worth on each application, because you can have multiple applications open at the same time, because 9 times out of 10, you are going to find a can of worms when you start working on a project. More often than not, you're like if you're doing a roofing project and you tear off the shingles and all of a sudden, oh Lord, we have, rotten decking here, and the flashing, is disintegrated, and half the roof joists along the chimney here are rotted out. That happens all the time. So it's always wise to leave yourself a little bit of room on each application for overages. Now, sometimes you will have applied for a couple of things, and then later on you want to add some more work to your application, especially if you don't have a lot on that. What you need to do is file an amendment with us, and all you have to do is just email your request. Okay, here's what I want to add to it. And then I write you an approval letter and we add the cost of that amendment onto your project. And so then you get full credit for that at the end. But it is really, really important that you do contact me if you want to add something to it. I just had a guy within the last month who had applied for just windows on his house because a previous owner had slapped in vinyl windows on the home and he wanted to go back to wood period correct windows, which was great. But he discovered partway into the project that his projecting bay window had a whole bunch of structural damage to it. But he never contacted our office to tell us that, oh, I need to add this to the project. And it added a considerable sum to what he had to spend. And because he didn't contact me, I couldn't give it to him because he hadn't gotten an amendment for it. And I felt terrible about it, but you know, the law is structured that you have to account for everything. So that's a really important, and it was a very painful and expensive lesson for him to learn. So, you know, that's a cautionary tale for anybody else who's working on a project.
If it's not, though, a change in the project scope, but it was a time and materials bid and it just
Oh.
takes, is that something we need to reach out to you about or no?
No, only if you are about to go over your 40,000 and we need to open another application to split it up. That would be another way to deal with it if you have a significant overage in terms of, so, you know, just keep an eye on your expenses. And if you're getting close to that $40,000 mark, you know, just let us know and we can open another project for you and move some of that work onto another application so that you don't lose out on any of your tax credits.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Paul, there used to be in a previous presentation, I saw somebody to contact regarding filling out the tax return. Is there still somebody at the state that handles questions about that? That you know of?
Well, okay, let me think. On the income producing ones, we do have the folks over at WEDC and they handle all the financial paperwork on that end. I am thinking that at least for the homeowner projects, I don't have a specific person at Wisconsin DOR that you can call, but I'm sure that that if you call the helpline and say, I'm working on schedule HR and I have some questions, can you connect me with the person who can help me, sort through that.
I'm
So
probably thinking about the income producing.
Yeah.
That's probably,
Yeah, I always tell
Okay.
people I'm on the design end of things and I'm not a tax expert. So, I don't want to be handing out any kind of tax advice because I don't want to give somebody the wrong information. I'd rather turn you over to somebody who really knows their stuff with that.
All right, well, Paul, thank you so much for your time, for this wonderful presentation. I think, again, we're gonna send this out to membership in a Zoom link so that people can rewatch it. You covered so much. This is really great. The link is also in the chat for the slides, so if anyone wants to grab those. But again, thank you for your time. We're going to move on to our normal club business or normal membership business here, but hopefully we can do this again in the next year or so.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, you all have a great evening and stay warm. And thanks again for inviting me. Take care, everyone.
thanks, Paul. Take
Okay,
care.
bye-bye.